A bit ahead of schedule, but this video is ready now. Warning to squeamish again. Considered by the 2006 Guide to the Cinema of H.P. Lovecraft to be the, quote, best serious Lovecraftian screen adaptation to date, with a solid cast, decent script, inventive direction, and excellent special effects that do justice to one of Lovecraft's darker tales, unquote. And you know what? It is an extremely impressive film for what it is. As if 1963's The Haunted Palace, directed by Roger Corman, the very first Lovecraft adaptation on film, Shatterbrain is based off of the 1941 posthumous novel, the novella, The Strange Case of Charles Dexter Ward. It was the seeming personal passion of Dan O'Bannon who wound up directing the film. Who was Dan O'Bannon? You may have read or heard that name around in the context of genre cinema. He wrote and starred in John Carpenter's classic number Dark Star, was involved in the writing of, and was arguably the initial brainchild of, if not inarguably really, Ridley Scott's Alien, and in the screenplays for Dead and Buried, Blue Thunder, Life Force, and Total Recall. His work was also adapted in the 1981 classic adolescent fantasia Heavy Metal. It's important to note, or worth noting certainly, and yes, it is important, he was involved in the production of the ill-fated Jodorowsky's Dune adaptation, which is how he got onto what wound up being Ridley Scott's Alien, which at one time would have been, I think, Dan O'Bannon's Alien, potentially. Oh no, Walter Hill's Alien, or potentially even Robert Aldrich's Alien. I don't dislike Robert Aldrich at all, but I'm glad it ended up with Ridley Scott, put it like that. I don't think anyone would disagree. The Resurrected, which I'm referring to by an alternate title, Shatterbrain, due to its likeable goofiness, was Dan O'Bannon's second and final directorial outing. His initial foray was 1985's wonderful splatter tour de force, Return of the Living Dead. A surprisingly strong film is Shatterbrain, much better in my opinion than that unnameable duology directed by Jean-Pierre Oulet, which I consider lackluster and disappointing, especially, certainly, compared to other Lovecraft adaptations from around that particular time. Dan O'Bannon was a fantastically able director, and I wish he had worked more in this field. Shatterbrain comes across as a film which saw that the Lovecraft adaptations up to that point had either been not up to scratch or non-serious, even if they were effective as horror films, say From Beyond and Reanimated. There's ultimately a non-seriousness to them, or at least something about them which was they were at an impasse with Lovecraft fans who wanted a more orthodox treatment on the silver screen, and Dan O'Bannon decided to give that community this in Shatterbrain. Unless you want to argue that a more small screen, low-key effort such as the previously discussed testimony of Randolph Carter by Andrew Lehman is more sufficient to the text of Lovecraft than Dan O'Bannon's The Resurrected, aka Shatterbrain. I think that's a fair call. I may even prefer Andrew Lehman's work at the end of the day, but nevertheless, what works in Shatterbrain is it's a phenomenal realization of Lovecraft's imagination and a strong horror film in its own right. I think it's reliant on the creative works of Lovecraft in order to. It's arguably more effective as a novelty than as an original horror film. Novelty being it's a Lovecraft film. You know, it's if you didn't know anything about H.P. Lovecraft, you might not consider this horror film as special as one who was familiar and knowing how challenging it could be to adapt his work. It's easy to consider Shatterbrain as well potentially a lesser. I was just praising Shatterbrain, but it's easy to consider it a lesser John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, which doesn't directly adapt Lovecraft, and as we can tell by its title similarity to At the Mountains of Madness, it's a clear, inarguable homage to his works, nevertheless. I'm uncertain whether I'll discuss. I think I'll wait to discuss In the Mouth of Madness. I don't think it'll be for a very Lovecraft Christmas. I think I might save it for another time. That's a very daunting and difficult film to talk about because it's so phenomenally powerful and intimidating. One of Carpenter's best. Oh my. Anyway, But even though Shatterbrain was relying on inventive direction, as the guide suggested, plus this terrific cinematography and an attempt to kind of conjure onto the screen what the characters in a Lovecraft text are experiencing, what's happening around them. These horrifying mansions in the distance, this creaky kind of rotting interior design, the maddening kind of deterioration of consciousness, and then the indescribable mutated flesh, not goofy and kind of grandiose like in Stuart Gordon's From Beyond, as much as I adore that film, but kind of horrifying and ugly and traumatizing as in Lovecraft's initial texts. And or Shatterbrain. Hey. If you're so inclined, do check out Dan O'Bannon's The Resurrected, aka Shatterbrain. I think there's something in here, certainly for Lovecraft fans, horror fans in general. Otherwise, yeah, maybe not. Maybe not for those who aren't so inclined.